That night in Nairobi, the music was loud, the lights were bright, and Kato was in his element, showing off to his friends. Nia sat quietly by his side, used to his arrogance, but nothing prepared her for what happened next. In the middle of his loud jokes, he kicked her under the table. It wasn't just the pain, it was the laughter that followed. His friends roared, phones flashed, and in that moment Nia felt the weight of every whisper, every stare. To them, she was weak, humiliated, just the wife of the so-called king. But deep inside, something shifted. She didn't cry, she didn't argue. She smiled, because she knew a secret Kato and his friends didn't. The empire they admired, the money they bragged about, the cars they drove, none of it truly belonged to Kato. For years, Nia had been the one managing the accounts, moving the money, making the deals. He thought she was just his shadow, but she was the brain and the backbone. That night, as the cameras captured her shame, she quietly vowed it would be the last time he laughed at her expense. When she left the club, she wasn't broken. She walked out with a steady calm, knowing exactly what she would do. The world saw a humiliated wife, but what was coming next would prove she was far from weak. Nia was ready to show everyone, especially Kato, who the real power had been all along. Kato's friends cheered and laughed like hyenas in the club, clapping him on the back as if humiliating Nia was the funniest thing they had ever seen. They ordered more bottles, raised their glasses, and shouted his name like he was a hero. Not one of them knew that the very drinks they were sipping, the cars they had parked outside, and the clothes they wore were all being paid for by the same woman they were mocking. Nia stood there, calm and silent, watching them perform their little show of loyalty around Kato. To them, he was the big man, the provider, the boss. But the truth was different. She was the one who had made all of this possible, and she was the one who could take it all away in a heartbeat. She turned and walked out of the club without a word. Everyone expected her to leave in shame, maybe with tears in her eyes, but she didn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, she walked away with the smallest smile on her face, a smile that Kato never noticed, but one that carried a promise. She had been silent for years, tolerating his insults, his arrogance, and his cruelty. But silence did not mean weakness. It meant she was waiting for the right moment. At home, Nia sat in her small office, surrounded by files, passwords, and contracts. Every offshore account number, every business deal, every hidden asset, she had access to it all. Kato thought he was untouchable because he had money and friends around him, but what he didn't realize was that the real power was sitting in front of a laptop, quietly planning. He thought she was his property, a wife with no choice but to endure him. In truth, everything he owned, everything he bragged about, was in her hands. The men at that table, those so-called friends, were nothing but snakes. They laughed at her pain because they lived off Kato's ego. They needed him to stay blind, to keep spending, to keep showing off. But their loyalty was as fake as the smiles on their faces. When the money dried up, they would vanish. Nia knew this better than anyone. And that night, as she replayed the humiliation in her mind, she also saw the perfect chance for revenge. She had been underestimated all her life, especially by Kato. He thought he was the master, but the truth was, he was a puppet, and she held every string. That smile she carried out of the club wasn't out of madness or pain, it was the smile of a woman who knew her time had come. Kato had mocked the wrong person. The very empire he used to crush her dignity was the same empire she would use to destroy him. The snakes around him had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to collapse, and it would be Nia herself who pulled it away. The house was quiet when Nia came back from the club. She did not cry, she did not shout, she did not even look broken. Instead, she walked straight into her small office, closed the door, and switched on her laptop. The glow from the screen lit up her face as she typed in passwords only she knew. Every number, every account, every contract was at her fingertips. For years, she had been the one behind the curtain, moving money, signing deals, and making sure Kato looked like the man he pretended to be. He thought he was the boss, but in truth, he was just the face. The real power was sitting in that chair, quietly clicking away. Her fingers moved fast, steady, confident. One by one, she froze the accounts. Millions disappeared in seconds, locked away in places only she could reach. Offshore funds, hidden assets, even the secret stash Cato thought no one knew about, gone with a single tap. She didn't hesitate, not once. Every click was payback for every insult, every slap, every humiliation. The flashy cars parked in his garage. All paid from her channels. The penthouse he bragged about to his friends. Signed under her name. He had mocked her in front of the world, but what he didn't know was that without her, he was nothing. Nia leaned back in her chair, breathing slowly. There was no guilt in her eyes, only peace. She thought of Cato, sleeping soundly, dreaming of more nights of laughter and arrogance. He had no idea that while he slept, his crown was being stripped away. When he woke up, he would not be the king he imagined. He would be a man with nothing, begging for the smallest coin. The same friends who cheered him on tonight would be the first to abandon him tomorrow. She poured herself a glass of water and looked out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, the same city where Cato thought he ruled. But in that moment, Nia knew the city was hers. She had pulled every string, flipped every switch, and turned her silence into a weapon sharper than any knife. The clock ticked past midnight. To Cato, it was just another night of drinking and showing off. To Nia, it was the night the game changed forever. She wasn't the victim anymore. She wasn't the quiet wife waiting in the shadows. She was the mastermind, and now she had finally set herself free. Tomorrow, when the sun rose, Cato would walk into his new life. No wealth, no power, no empire. He would finally feel the emptiness he had forced on her for years. And Nia, calm and unshaken, would watch his fall knowing one simple truth: the beggar he would become was the king he once pretended to be. The next morning, Cato woke up as if nothing had changed. He stretched, checked his phone, and smirked at the long list of messages from his friends. To him, it was just another day to play the rich man. He picked up his keys, called his mistress, and took her out for brunch at an expensive hotel in Nairobi. He walked in with his usual pride, ordering the best food and wine, sure that everyone was watching him. When the bill came, he slid his card across the table with a smug smile. But then, something happened that Cato had never experienced before. The waiter came back, bowed slightly, and said, "Sir, your card has been declined." Cato laughed so loudly that even his mistress looked embarrassed. He thought it was a joke. He pulled out another card, then another. Declined. 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 The laughter in his throat began to die. His mistress gave him a nervous smile, but he saw the question in her eyes. The people around them had started whispering. For a man like Cato, who lived on image and pride, it was a knife to the chest. By afternoon, the news had already spread. Nairobi is small, and gossip runs faster than fire. Cato's broke, people whispered. The big man has fallen. His friends, the same ones who had laughed at Nia's humiliation, were now avoiding his calls. Their loyalty lasted only as long as his money. Without it, he was just another loud man with nothing to offer. The cars were repossessed, the penthouse was locked, and the businesses that once praised him started pulling out of deals. Every pillar of his empire crumbled one after another, leaving him standing in the ruins with nothing but his shame. Cato stormed into his office, only to find staff packing up files. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing, not with congratulations or praise, but with angry partners demanding explanations. He shouted, cursed, and blamed everyone but himself. Deep down, though, a fear he had never known before was eating at him. He remembered the way Nia had walked out of the club, calm and smiling, as if she had already won a battle he hadn't even realized had started. By evening, he sat alone in his car, sweat dripping down his face. He tried calling his mistress, but she had blocked him. He tried calling his so-called brothers, but none of them picked up. He stared at his empty wallet and the dark screen of his phone, and for the first time in his life, Kato understood what it meant to have nothing. What he didn't know was that it wasn't luck or fate. It was Nia. Quiet, patient, and merciless, she had pulled every brick from under his empire until it collapsed. She had taken everything except the one thing he could never escape, his shame. And that shame, unlike money, could not be replaced. Nia could have stopped after taking away his money, but she knew that true revenge was not only about breaking his pockets, it was about breaking his pride. Kato's arrogance had been built on one lie, that he was the genius behind the empire. For years, the world had believed that story because Nia stayed silent in the background. She let him take the credit, she let him shine in front of cameras, while she sat quietly at home moving money, closing deals, and planning investments. But now, silence was no longer needed. She was ready to let the truth out. She gathered every document she had kept over the years, proof of transactions, contracts signed in her name, emails showing her strategies, receipts that pointed to her investments. Every number, every signature, every piece of evidence told one clear story: Kato was only a mask. The real brain, the real builder, had been her all along. She sent the files to a few trusted journalists, the kind who loved exposing a scandal. Within hours, the story exploded online. Headlines screamed across Nairobi and beyond, "The weak wife who was the real billionaire." People could not get enough of it. Social media was flooded with Nia's name. Clips of her calm smile leaving the club went viral, now seen as the walk of a woman who knew the truth long before anyone else. Invitations poured in from business forums, charity events, and global networks. Everyone wanted to meet the woman who had been underestimated, mocked, and yet turned out to be the true mastermind. Meanwhile, Kato could only watch in horror. The same media that once called him a king now called him a fraud. Every news channel showed Nia's documents, every talk show praised her sharp mind, every article celebrated her resilience. His name was no longer respected, it was ridiculed. No one cared about his expensive suits or his flashy cars anymore, because now everyone knew those things had been paid for by her brilliance. Nia did not need to shout or gloat. She let the evidence speak. While Kato hid from the cameras, she stepped into the spotlight with grace. She attended events dressed in simple but elegant outfits, answering questions with calm confidence. Every word she spoke made people admire her even more. They called her an icon, a role model, a queen who rose from humiliation to power. For Kato, it was unbearable. He had lost his money, but this was worse. He had lost his image, his identity, the thing he valued above all else. And the cruelest part was that he could do nothing to stop it. The world had already chosen Nia. She was no longer the shadow behind him, she was the headline, the face, the empire itself. And he, the man who once laughed as he kicked her, was now nothing more than a footnote in her story. Kato could not take it anymore. Everywhere he turned, people were whispering about him. Once, he was the man others envied, but now he was the man they mocked. His phone no longer rang with party invitations or business deals, instead, it rang with angry creditors and reporters asking about Nia. His face, once on the front pages as a business mogul, was now plastered across headlines calling him a fraud. The humiliation burned through him like fire, and in his anger, he drove straight to Nia's apartment, determined to confront her. He burst through the door without knocking, his voice shaking the walls. "You think you're smart? Fix this. Give me back my accounts, give me back my life," he shouted, his face red with rage. In the past, his loud voice and violent temper would have made Nia shrink in fear. But not this time. She didn't even flinch. She sat calmly in her chair, her laptop open in front of her, her expression cool and steady. Without saying a word, she tapped a key, and the screen lit up with a video. Kato froze when he saw himself on the screen, drunk and laughing as he kicked her in the club. The video played on repeat, each frame reminding him of the moment he thought he was untouchable. "This," Nia said softly, "is why you lost everything." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried more weight than all his screams. Kato's eyes darted from the screen to her face, his anger colliding with panic. He tried to grab the laptop, but she pushed it away with calm strength. "You don't scare me anymore," she said firmly. "Your empire didn't fall because of me. It fell because of you. You built it on humiliation, arrogance, and lies. And I simply showed the world the truth." For the first time, Kato had no words. His threats, his anger, his reputation, none of it mattered now. The world had already chosen who to believe, and it wasn't him. He paced the room like a trapped animal, pulling at his hair, shouting curses, but it was useless. Nia simply leaned back, watching him unravel. The man who once strutted like a king was now reduced to a broken shell, clawing at the ruins of his own pride. As the video continued to play, Kato covered his face with his hands. He realized there was no way to silence Nia, no way to silence the world. The evidence was everywhere, and the people who once cheered for him now cheered for her. He had lost control forever. Nia stood up slowly, looking him straight in the eyes. "Leave," she said. "There's nothing left for you here." And with that, Kato walked out, defeated, his rage powerless against her calm strength. Nia closed the laptop and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, she was completely free. Kato's fall was complete. The man who once walked through Nairobi like he owned the city was now a ghost. His friends had vanished, his mistress had abandoned him, and his name carried nothing but shame. With no money and no allies, he became the kind of man he used to laugh at, begging for favors, making empty promises, and getting doors slammed in his face. Every corner he turned reminded him of what he had lost, and every whisper of his name was a reminder of how far he had fallen. While Kato sank deeper into the shadows, Nia rose into the light. She was no longer hiding behind his name, no longer signing documents in secret. She rebranded everything under her own name, and the world welcomed her with open arms. The same empire that people once thought belonged to Kato was now proudly hers. She took the seat at the head of the table, and this time, everyone knew exactly who had earned it. The media celebrated her not as someone's wife, but as a leader, a visionary, and the true mind behind the wealth. Nia chose to move her office to Mombasa, away from the toxic circles that had once cheered for Kato. The ocean air felt fresh, the people around her respected her not because of the man she had been tied to, but because of the fire she carried within herself. Her new team worked with her, not against her, and for the first time, she felt the freedom of being in charge of her own destiny without anyone trying to silence her. Every morning, she would stand by the window of her new office, looking out at the blue waters, a soft smile on her face. She remembered the nights of pain, the insults, the humiliation in the club, and she realized how far she had come. Those memories no longer hurt her, they fueled her. They reminded her of the strength it had taken to rise, and the courage it took to finally choose herself. People admired her not just for her wealth, but for her story. Women looked up to her as proof that silence does not mean weakness, and that sometimes revenge is not loud or violent, it is calm, patient, and final. Men who once dismissed her now sought her advice, and companies fought for her partnership. She had become everything Kato had pretended to be, and more. As for Kato, he could only watch from a distance. He saw the woman he once mocked now standing taller than he ever had. But Nia no longer thought about him. She had already won. Her life was no longer tied to his shadow. She was free, powerful, and respected in her own right. This was her new beginning, and nothing could take it away from her. Months passed, and the city had almost forgotten Kato. Once a man everyone wanted to be seen with, he was now a shadow lingering at the edges of events, desperate to be noticed. He showed up at a charity gala, hoping to remind people he still mattered, but no one paid him any mind. He stood alone, watching others laugh, shake hands, and make connections that no longer included him. His suit was old, his smile forced, and his pride completely broken. Then the room shifted. Cameras turned, people whispered, and the crowd parted as Nia walked in. She was glowing, dressed in the same gown Kato had once mocked her for wearing. Back then, he had called it cheap. Tonight, under the soft lights of the gala, it looked regal. Every head turned to admire her, every voice spoke her name with respect. She was no longer Kato's wife. She was the woman who had built an empire, survived humiliation, and risen higher than anyone thought possible. Kato's face burned as he tried to look away, but he couldn't. He saw her smile, saw the strength in her walk, and knew that nothing he did could ever undo the story the world now believed. Nia raised her glass, locked eyes with him from across the room, and leaned down to whisper to her daughter, "He kicked me once, but I rose higher than he could ever reach." The crowd erupted into applause, not for Kato, but for her. The sound echoed through the hall, drowning out his shame. In that moment, his downfall was sealed forever. Nia had not only won her freedom, she had won her crown.